Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for joining me on this journey into the ecological dynamics for grappling using the constraints-led approach. I am Sam Battlefields. That is not my real name. But I wanted to take a little bit of a diverge from what I have been talking about, which is the planning and as you can see on the screen just here, the debriefs of sessions. One of the reasons being is we didn't have a coaching session today. I just got to roll with Aaron quite a bit. But what I wanted to do was just go through a couple of sort of the notes or the highlights that I made in the Constraints-Led Approach book. Part of the reason for this is I am about to start the dynamics of skill acquisition, and also I have the language of coaching on the cards as well. These look like, again, some pretty hefty reading, and I'm looking forward to getting into them. But I, as per the information that I'm getting out of Make It Stick, which is another book that I'm currently reading. I just wanted to go over a few of the things that I've read already, and give myself a bit of, I suppose, make some connections. There's evidence to suggest that when you sort of connect things to what you know, so connect sort of underlying theoretical principles, for example, with practical examples from what you know, you are more likely to remember them for a longer term, creates neural pathways, blah, 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 blah. So I figure I'd start doing that. This is a little bit of information. I am in sort of the first chapter, CLA, the theoretical framework. And one thing that I have highlighted is coaches need to avoid getting bogged down in the common everyday use of the term constraints, which may have negative connotations as a binding or limiting factor on someone. This was something that that actually pops up quite regularly. In that, you know, I can literally see when I say I'm doing the constraints-led approach. People, they sort of, you know, there's a little bit of a bristle. It's like, oh, I don't, I will guarantee you that I felt the same way. All right, that as soon as I heard it, it's got a negative connotation to it. It means restrict what you're learning. That doesn't make sense, you know. And so I've tried to sort of figure out ways to explain it, and you know, I've come up with really crappy off the cuff sort of things like, oh no, it just means that you limit the limitations and alright, let's not worry about it. Essentially what it means is it is best conceived, according to this, they are best conceived as boundaries that shape the form structure of the biological system, searching for a functional state of an organisation. Now, the way I've kind of looked at it within grappling is when you use a constraints-led approach, essentially what you're doing is you're taking a area of jiu-jitsu or area of grappling, and you're giving people the opportunity to not have to think about the multitude of ways that things could go wrong, could go right, could, you know, what's going to happen when they go wrong, what's going to happen when they go right. You know, you don't, like, if you try something knowing that someone like me, 130 kilo, you know, experienced purple belt, is going to land on top of you and hold you down if you fuck it up, well, you might not be so you might not be so inclined to go and try that thing. Whereas if we say, okay, let's take out the opportunity for me to then collapse on you if that goes all wrong, and the goal is to just get your hook in, right? Just get a foot underneath, and then elevate that person. All right, that allows them to then go, okay, well, I don't need to worry about the 17, 18 other steps that are going to happen from here. What we're going to be able to achieve is a particular goal, and it allows me to then build, I'm trying, in some ways there is a comparison between the collecting of techniques, but I can see that it's less about taking a technique and then putting it next to another technique and then connecting that, because with this you're looking at a global, you're constraining to get a hook in, and what that means is they can do it any way they want. They can do it 3 different ways, and this was sort of evident yesterday where Dennis, instead of necessarily trying to get up and over to get his hook in, he just dragged Aaron back into it and put his hook in that way. So it gave this alternative, these separate alternatives that the constraint-led approach allowed to do. So I'm really happy with that. Also, constraints are broadly information sources that can act over long time scales. Now, the way I the reason why I highlighted that is, what I was saying before, if you've just got these linear progression, here's a technique connected to this technique, then you're going to miss that during that technique there's 15 other offshoots, right? And it's not until you've collected all the techniques and then started going back through and going, oh, that one goes off there. Whereas in this case, you're kind of putting a sphere around the technique as such, and going, hey, go and explore in that sphere, right? Go and explore all the affordances that are in that sphere. And when I say all, obviously, for example, I'm a bit heavier, so I tend to do that, pull them back into me, rather than try and be a bit more athletic with longer limbs and get the thing over blah, 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 right? So within that sphere, and there's overlapping within those spheres, right? So there's a sphere here, but, all right, let's just try and, there's a sphere, but instead of it just being here's another sphere up here, the sphere overlaps with other techniques and that sort of thing, and you can then see, oh, that goes over, oh yeah, and if I'm on my side and blah blah blah. Anyway, that's that's something I picked up on. So a key theoretical influence from in ecological dynamics. The most powerful impact derived from the thinking of Mr. Carl Newell on how coordination emerged under constraints operating at different timescales. So this is something that Greg Souders was talking about, and it's something that I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm connecting something wrong here, but I'm not. These are uni level textbooks. I never went to tertiary education. I'm not a dumbass. I know what I'm reading. I can look things up. Blah blah blah. But what this under different constraints emerging under different timescales. I'll probably have to look that up actually a bit. So to explain, yeah. Okay. development process. Well, it's funny actually. I was going to talk about this. The original constraints model proposed by Newell sought to explain development processes in infants and children, and didn't mention any applications to sport performance, skill acquisition, coaching, and learning. But within a decade, it had given its name to the methodological model in sports pedagogy that is currently known as the constraint-led approach. All right, so I want to, I didn't highlight that second part, by the way, but it's quite interesting that because I've been using this. So I've got he's almost 3 years old, little Oscar, and I'm trying to get him obviously to learn how to do things by himself. I don't want him to give up, and that's one of the things that he regularly does. Is he's like, I can't open this yogurt. Can you do it? And sometimes it is a little bit hard, So it's like, just snap it for him and let him go. But I want him to do that, so I started going, yep, bang, you do it, and so I'd snap it a little bit so it would break the seal as such, and then give it to him. One of the one of the things that he clearly wants to do, but he's not quite got it yet, which is dressing himself. And so, I holding out the shorts so he can put his shorts on, and then I was like, no, you do it, and I can just see that he just it's just not there, it's the mental, the connections just aren't being made. It's kind of like he goes, you go 1, 2, 3, and he goes 1, 2, 3, and he's just not got that coordination. But so using the constraint-led approach, I'm like, okay, well, how do I make this easier for him? And it's like, well, instead of giving them to him and saying, open them up and do this, I'm going to put them on the floor, open both things so he can just step straight into it, and then he can pull them up. And he's been having a bit of trouble with his pulling him up over his butt. So what I started doing was getting it to his butt and then going, now you grab the back and pull it up over. So anyway, it's quite interesting that comparison, because I literally started using that approach with him. See, so I've highlighted some interesting things that I'm not even sure that I kind of understand why I've highlighted them. So the ecological psychologist James Gibson offered innovative insights into the relationship between perception and action, which underpin how constraints shape the behaviours of athletes and sports teams during practice and performance. His theoretical work guides practitioners towards appreciating the importance of context for understanding performance and learning. This idea derives from the notion that the person-environment relationship is the appropriate scale of analysis for understanding human behaviour. So it's, yeah, and that this is kind of a common theme, is obviously the individual and the environment are kind of factors in this, whereas, and it's interesting because I've been sort of saying that in grappling, the other person is your environment, because that's the thing that's being acted upon and within, and that is to be perceived. If it's, if you are to act upon something, the other person is the thing that needs to be perceived, because ultimately, like, yes, heat, all that kind of thing, but it's mostly that within which that sphere of the person's body is the environment. And I don't know if that's correct, but it's something theoretically it should be correct, because we're on a flat mat. You could control for temperature factors, you could control for that, and you could control for a range of things, but for the most part you're on a flat mat that serves just one purpose, and that's to be there for grappling, essentially. I'm not sure I'm going to do much more on that thought process. Anyway, hopefully you're getting something out of it. If you are, awesome. If you're not, stick around, because I'm sure I'm going to get better at this. Thank you very much for joining me on the ecological dynamics and constraint-led approach to grappling. Much love.